Blockton said if Trump doesn't grow taxes, I think his base will turn on him. And he hadn't accomplished anything at that point. I think he was trying to energize his base by sort of verbally attacking the players. And secondly, I think in any country, if you don't stand for the flag, I think whether it's China or the United States or Mexico or Russia, I think you're going to get some blowback from the government. And I think the players should be prepared for a blowback from Trump. But I think that was his response to the players. I think was his attempt to energize his base over patriotism.
It was, but it also exposes the fact that he has no cultural understanding background. He doesn't understand the fight that people of color have endured for generations, if not hundreds of years. And so that's part of what he lacks is cultural understanding. Because some of the best hustlers are African Americans.
Yeah, he exploits the differences.
Right.
That's his whole thing.
Yeah.
And he didn't make that up. Somebody about 10 years ago wrote a book, and I don't know if you've heard John Maynard Keynes' famous statement that madmen and authority are distilling their frenzy from some book that was written years ago. And somebody wrote a book and said, the Republicans could win instead of being like, surreptitious, dog whistle anti-black and talking about, paroles, be blatantly anti-black, and there's still enough you can win, and that's what Trump and Bannon, said that, that's, you saw Bannon in Europe, he said, like, when they call you racist, wear it proudly, say I'm a racist.
And that is the definition of institutional racism. And when you have an economy that is structured as it is with the haves versus have-nots, and then you add a layer of racism, that is intentional. Mm-hmm. That's intentional of keeping people down. It's current day slavery. It's institutional slavery. I was thinking about that just the other day. Slavery doesn't look like it did, 200 years ago. What it looks like is this black male who's walking down the street, who may have his pants down a little bit low. You're walking the street, we're going to stop you. And oh, by the way, you look like maybe another black male that we've been looking for. And then you start running, and then you get shot. How many times do we see that? But here's the next thing that happens. When a community sees this happen again and again and again, it causes triggers. So not only are we going to have the 4th anniversary of the shooting of Mike Brown, but we're about to have another anniversary that's called Charlottesville. Right. And what people saw in Charlottesville is triggering. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely triggering to a people who have been kept down because of these policies that say that a black male is never ever going to be equal to a white male.
Okay, and that's funny because I was just about to.
It's not funny.
I was about to segue to Charlottesville.
Yes, okay.
I was about to segue to Charlottesville. You read my mind. But in my opinion, this is my opinion. I'm 50 years old. Okay? I'm from Virginia. I grew up an hour from Charlottesville. I went to business school in Charlottesville. And in my opinion, this economy, again, go back to this economy, it's not as strong as people say it is. And I think the media, I think the government, in my opinion, seems to be trying to hide that, mask that this $30 trillion from the Obama administration that's supposed to be so-called growing the economy, it grew something. It wasn't with the economy. I think it's grown Wall Street and the investor class.
Yes.
And the stock market is controlled by 10%, maybe 10% of the country controls like 90% of the stock market. What good does it do to have Apple with a $1 trillion market capitalization? What good does it do to have this Dow at 26,000? No economist would tell you to do that. I study economics, so I think the government's trying to cover it up. I think when people find out that, after all this money, we're still gonna have another recession. I think people are gonna tear this country all to hell.
That's why I say that we're back. We are pre-Great Depression right now.
Right. So you're voicing that. My point, I think, and I've been on Earth for 50 years. Nobody has ever asked me about a statue. Nobody has ever asked me about Robert E. Lee. What you think about Robert E. Lee? What you think about when you think about Beauregard or Jefferson Davis or Stonewall Jackson? What it sounds like is, this is what it sounds like to me, that when I was a kid, I was never a problem with my parents. The only problem I ever had was with a ball. I couldn't put it down. broke vases, storm doors, windows, everything. And, you know, my mother would come home at, you know, she usually heard about what I'd done. She'd be home by 5:30. And I could tell by how fast she was walking when she left the car if she heard about what I'd done. And it's time for me to get that belt, and guess what I want to do? Well, Mom, what about Beauregard? What about Jefferson Davis? Well, she listened to Jefferson Davis for a little while and Beauregard. When you finish talking about Beauregard and Jefferson Davis and Stonewall Jackson, you still want to talk about what you did, and you still going to get this belt. To me, this talk about these flags and these statues is a false flag to get people's attention, distort people's attention away from how poor this economy really is after this $30 trillion of wealth effect. I've been on the earth for 50 years. Nobody's ever asked me what I thought about statues. So I think the whole Charlottesville was manufactured drama.
Oh, yeah.
It was manufactured, and Trump's response to it wasn't perfect.
It was despicable.
Let me finish. I think he started out pretty good. He said, yeah, it was. I think he said something about Charlottesville was reprehensible. Then he said, oh, it was good people on both sides. I think he misspoke on that.
That was triggering
Right.
to black people.
Right.
That was very triggering to black people.
But I think I think we should talk about, when you get to his policies, definitely a dichotomy in how he spoke about Charlottesville and how he spoke about when someone drove a car onto a sidewalk in France or Europe. He called it terrorism. Excuse me, France and UK, he called it terrorism. He didn't call it terrorism in Charlottesville. But my only point is that the whole Charlottesville thing, in my opinion, was manufactured drama,
Well,
and it's a false flag.
There was a woman who was killed. There were people who were stuck in a church because you had these neo-Nazis outside with these little tiki torches. I don't think that's manufactured. These are people who are obviously racist and feel emboldened to determine that other people are not equal to them. And that is a problem. That is not manufactured.
If I want to trigger young black women, it wouldn't be that hard to do. Say something negative about Beyonce, and you would trigger them. If I want to trigger white men down south,
No.
I
don't agree.
If I want to trigger white men down south, go mess with one of those statues. And you're going to trigger white men down south.
That is
That's my
true.
point.
That's
And
true.
it was manufactured drama. That's what I'm saying.
That part is true.
Right.
But I'm not saying...
Whether it's right or wrong
You
for
know
them to
what
be triggered.
triggers a black woman?
What?
Is when a black woman is attacked by a white person. Case in point is what happened to Auntie Maxine. When Charles Schumer and the rest of them went after Auntie Maxine, even Claire McCaskill, when she came after me. That was triggering to black women.
Okay.
You can't go after a black woman and you not black.
Okay, but I'm
That's
saying,
triggering.
But what I'm saying, whether it should be triggered or not, whether you agree with it or
And
not.
that's not manufactured.
Whether you agree with it or not, if you want to trigger white men down south, go mess with one of those statues.
The whole statues issue is in Soviet Union, former Soviet countries, that was a big issue, the statues. In fact, Hungary is one of the few places, if you ever went into Hungary, outside of Budapest, 30 miles from Budapest, they have a place called Statues Park. Because and if you ever saw in Russia and Poland, they had all these statues of Commune Lenin and Marx and all these other minor, and they were all smashed. But in Hungary, they said, let's not do that. Let's take them to a place 30 miles outside of town, put them in one giant enclosure, and call it a Statues Park and charge people $10 to see them. Now, even with the statues, I mean, there's a lot of difference between Robert E. Lee and Nathan Bedford Forrest. And there's still 15 statues of Nathan Bedford Forrest in the South. Nathan Bedford Forrest was like 80 years ahead of his time in far as racism, whereas Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis, they just wanted slaves, But Nathan Bedford Forrest was like Hitler. He wanted to kill the black people. And so he not only he also founded the Ku Klux Klan after the war. But not only did he kill a whole bunch of black people, he resulted in the deaths of lots and lots of people, because when the Civil War started, and pretty much all wars at that time, the practice with prisoners was when each side had a couple of thousand prisoners, they'd exchange them. And that, sort of humane and things like that. Nathan Bedford Forrest, because the Union had black soldiers, he had to execute everyone. He demanded every single one be executed on the spot as soon as they were caught. So Lincoln said, if you're going to do that, we're not going to exchange prisoners anymore. And so no more prisoner exchanges. Many, many Southerners died in Illinois, where they had a prison. And, in Andersonville in the South, the the people who ran that got executed at the end of the war because they had pictures of starving Union prisoners, but it was all because of Nathan Bedford Forrest, and there's still 15 statues of him in the South.
People love that stuff. It's and that's triggering.
Yeah,
When
but-
people know that history, it's triggering to them.
Yeah.
Right, but I think outside of the Nathan Bedford Forrest, I think if you want to trigger, I think a lot of, I mean, all the clear blue sky people want to let's remove the statue. I think it's a false flag, in my opinion.
Well, I think what they did in Budapest,
I think they're trying to distract people from
what's.
from what we're talking about earlier.
See, I think it is an argument. Again, we got to go to that place, that space, that role that everybody has. It is offensive to have these Confederate monuments out in different places. And maybe for generations, people didn't know what a monument meant and who it was. And we have to accept that sometimes we don't
They
know
shouldn't be in front
who
of
some of
City
these people
Hall.
are.
Right.
They might be in a museum, they might be in a place like Statue Park where people can go see them as part of a historical thing, but, you don't destroy them, but you don't leave them in front of City Hall and places like that.
I'll just put this one. I'll put this out there.
Do you and I agree? You and I
Yeah,
agree. That's what I'm talking about.
I've been on, like, anyway, I said I've been on the road for 50 years already. I said that 3 times already, right? Okay. But I'll put this out there. I'm going to tell you what's triggering to me. I'm going to tell you, I almost hit the roof when this guy, Clementa Pinckney, was murdered in South Carolina. And this is what happens when you let these things fester. So the media saying this 21-year-old kid, he drove past 100 churches to get to this one church because he knew the history of this, I guess, Emmanuel Church, which it didn't make any sense. This kid probably didn't know anything about this church, but he knew that Clementa Pinckney was a senator, state senator. It was assassination of a senator. That's what it was, and they made it seem like, oh, he just happened to pick this church for the history and blah, 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 blah. And they never really talked about how it was the assassination of a senator, how heinous it was. But, so I can't think of the gentleman's name. Clyburn, I think it was. Senator or congressman.
He's a Congressman Clyburn. Yeah.
So when you let these laws, and when Clinton passed his law about 3 strikes and you're out or what have you, or there were only a few politicians who spoke out against it, that they knew what it would lead to, that you would have a bunch of, now you have 1 in 3 black men locked up.
That is correct.
Simply for being black. One of them was Scott from Virginia. Okay. And so these laws have been going on, and Clinton, it may have been a good idea at the time, he thought it was a good idea. When the law went left, nobody said anything. When people saw this law going left and these people being locked up, and so now the young white kid, Dylan Roof, he probably doesn't know a world where you didn't have 1 in 3 black men being locked up simply for being black. He probably doesn't know that world. I know that world. And so when Clementa Pinckney was on the Senate floor saying that, we think police officers should have body cameras, I think the young kid, Rufus, was thinking that this guy's taking away my rights. You follow?
But that's what we go through. I am a state senator. But I am a state senator. And let me tell you, 4 years ago, when we went through this, tomorrow will be the 4th anniversary of the shooting of Mike Brown. We had all kinds of KKK. I mean, all kinds. So when Clemente and the other church members were killed, I took that very seriously because we get death threats. When you stand up for Black lives, you get death threats. I got death threats. That's part of our life that we have to go through, and so it is serious.
Right, and it's what happened to him was ridiculous, and but my point I was trying to make, I think Clyburn said, well, his reaction to this situation was, oh, we need to remove the flag. So it's like what's giving me a headache is that I don't work in Congress. People live in their daily lives. This law, we need to wake up one day with this where you basically with this police state, it was happening gradually.
Yeah.
Let me finish. It was happening gradually, and we've had black politicians in office during that time for 20, 30 years who never said a word. They never opened their
Hello,
mouths.
hello.
Now when it's in front of you, we need to move the flag. No, we need to move the flag.
Well, wait. Let me give you an example.
Let me finish. So he brings up this thing about some flag. Now all of a sudden, the spotlight's off of all these black politicians who have been in office for decades, watching this policy affect African Americans in their community, never said a word. Now they want to talk about a flag. Let me finish. I don't see any YouTube videos of any black politicians 15, 20 years ago standing up on the Senate floor like Patrick Henry said, give me liberty, give me death. Hell no, you're not going to keep passing these policies that's going to affect my community. Now when it's in front of everybody, it's something about a flag, it's something about a statue. You follow?
I feel you. So
That's
let
my goal.
me give you 2 examples. I'm with you on this. Let me give you 2 examples. Number 1, 4 years ago when Ferguson happened, Congress was on a 4-week break, and our black congressman, Lacy Clay, didn't show up for 7 days. Black man. We have a young 18-year-old who just graduated from high school whose body was laying on the ground in the heat for 4 hours, and he was on vacation for 6 or 7 days, did not show up to his district to deal with the pain of every single African American mother and father. Secondly, when we dealt with Charlottesville last year, our state party, Democratic Party, I'm a Democrat. And one of the things that came out from our state party is, yes, Black Lives Matter. And the B in black was lowercase. The B in black was lowercase. You hear what I'm saying?
Right.
So no, and this is the other thing that we had to deal with. When Mike Brown left, the answer, which, you know, in the legislature, it should have been way more inclusive of policies that we need, making sure we do have body cameras, making sure that we do have cultural training for these police officers who don't live in these areas where they serve. All of these things that should have happened after Mike Brown was shot in the Missouri legislature. What happened is we dealt with ticketing. That's which should have happened, but the establishment, both Democrat and Republican, all white, said we're just going to deal with black males being killed by making sure that people don't get ticketed for walking around with their pants down. That's how Missouri dealt with it. And we're not done. That's why we are still in a situation. Let me tell you something. I gave you a book earlier today.
I've
legacy
read it
book.
already.
I gave you my legacy book for a reason, because I wanted you to see that this, one quote that I had in there is, Ferguson happened, and there are multiple cities, multiple states that instituted new policies so that a Ferguson wouldn't happen. But in Missouri, Ferguson can still happen at any given time, because the establishment, the white establishment, the quiet blacks who want to be comfortable and be in a Pollyannish state, what they're looking at is, let's just cover it up here and cover it up there. Let's give a grant for $2,000 to this business over here, and let's find a mother to help out. And there's still thousands of people who get no recovery from our policies. In fact, what they do is pass Prop P, which is worth $88 million in St. Louis County that the taxpayers are paying for, and that revenue goes to developers, it goes to the buddies of the St. Louis County executive.
So basically,
That's the policy that happened.
I got a political type question, which you're probably much better to answer. It relates to Trump. I mean, given there's like 2 schools of thought with the people who, the Democrats, regarding Trump. I mean, one is sort of, he's so bad and there's so much danger. I mean, we didn't talk about some of the really bad things that could he be doing, you know, aside from, you know, the last time I was here, it was the day, you know, I told John McLaughlin, I said, you know, this could be the end, you know, because Trump said he was going to end Iran, you know, And, you know, there's lots and lots of really horrible things he could do. And, you know, to some extent, he's been not nearly as bad yet. You know, he was campaigning on immediately deporting 12 million people. And literally, that we remember, he was saying all 12 million.
Yeah, and you know what?
Yeah.
You know what? Where his blood, the blood on his hands, are the kids who are in these concentration camps, who have been molested. One committed suicide. This is the policy that this man is allowing to happen. What happened to humanity?
Yeah. So the question becomes, the people who are, you know, against Trump, do they take sort of the Winston Churchill 1941 attitude, which was when Hitler invaded the Soviet Union, they said to Winston Churchill, well, how come you say nice things about Russia? You know, you hated communists and everything. And he said, well, if Hitler invaded hell, he'd have nice things to say about the devil. Meaning, you know, that would be, you know, as opposed to, so that would mean Democrats sort of forgetting about a lot of stuff and just saying, let's concentrate on getting rid of Trump and not fight among ourselves, or not push things that are, you know, abolish ICE. That was, you know, doesn't play well in a lot of places, you know, getting rid of custody.
Well, now what's your question? Because I'm
The question is sort of, which do you sort of think is a better idea? To concentrate on, you know, saying, well, and it's a two-part thing. For now, concentrate on getting rid of Trump, because, you know, we could have nothing left if we don't do that, as opposed to getting candidates that, you know, would not sit and ignore, you know, respond to Ferguson by just, you know, plenty of Democrats say, oh, well, that's something.
It's so much. I appreciate your question, but I go back to the point. Everybody has a role, a space, and a place. And we have so much chaos, so many troubles in our American society today. We need people in all places. Yes, we need progressive candidates. What we don't need are candidates who are selling out the values of progressives. So I'll give you a great example. Claire McCaskill just said, Democrat from the state of Missouri, said she's running against Josh Hawley. She's not running against Trump. She just said that. She said that I'm not here in the Kansas City Star. She said, I'm not here to fight Trump. That's a quote in the Kansas City Star, and she's running for re-election. So is she expecting my vote or people who live in rural Missouri? It doesn't sound like she wants my vote, because if I lived in Massachusetts, you know, someone else would be getting my vote. But we don't have that kind of leadership in the state of Missouri. Yes, if you are running for office and you represent us in D.C., you better fight against Trump. Don't be weak.
I think you misspoke earlier. I think you said that.
How did he
I think you implied that I wouldn't be a good person to answer that question.
No,
I'm an excellent person. I'm an excellent person to answer that
legit.
question. I'm going to answer it. If you don't want me to, I'm going to answer it. And I think that first of all, I think people need to focus on, avoid the personality, Trump's personality, and Stormy Daniels' hair, and get away from this personality and Russia. Because I think you were here when John, you may have been here when John said that he said the post that American people really don't care about Russia. And I think Trump may be insecure about trying to explain away Russia because people think he won because of Russia. He won fair and square. He didn't win. I don't think he won because of Russia. I think he won fair and square. But I think people need to focus on, the Democrats need to focus on, and people who want to resist Trump need to focus on his policy, the dichotomy in his policy. You have one set of rhetoric.
I disagree with you. I disagree.
I'll
let you finish, but I disagree with you.
That's fine. Let me finish. You know you don't know how to get back to your hotel without my help, right?
I know.
Okay. Anyway, so there's a dichotomy between how he spoke about the players and how he speaks about certain corporations. He wants to be company man. I've followed Donald Trump's career for years, and so he's always been had an image of sort of being a maverick and being brash and bold. Be brash and bold all the time. Be a maverick and be brash when it comes to these corporations. The disconnect between how he talks about certain, say, Allegan, who sold a drug to like a Mohawk tribe to avoid having generic competition. A disconnect between how he speaks about Celgene, who funded his campaign, who just raised prices for Revlimid, like a cancer drug, like 20%. He's not going after them. You follow what I'm saying? But he wants to go after Kaepernick. He wants to go after certain. He picks and chooses who he wants to be brash with. I think you need to focus on his policy. And the other thing is that I don't think it's just going to be a sun in the pie in the sky if we just replace Trump with Democrats who you have to offer something better than what he's already doing.
It's all of it. But what happened with Russia is treason. And we live in a democracy. And if the people who go to their polls every year or every other year to vote for a certain person and certain policies, if their vote does not matter because we have Russia interfering in our elections, that is problematic to our founding fathers of this country, our Constitution. We cannot allow for a foreign state to dictate what leaders are going to be in this country.
I don't think.
That is a huge deal.
Personally, I don't think. You may correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think Russia had anything to do with Donald Trump being elected. I don't think anybody wanted Hillary Clinton, and I don't even think the Democratic Party wanted Hillary Clinton per se. I think Bernie Sanders was a better candidate.
Well, I supported Bernie, but I still support Democrats.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but I think Bernie Sanders was a better candidate. I think you're talking about somebody being undermined. You want to talk about political system being undermined? You think you need to talk about how the Democratic Party undermined Bernie.
Okay, so see now you're doing a Donald Trump. You're doing a Donald Trump right now. You are trying to put this argument in a whole different place. Every single time he gets in trouble, he does something else.
You think I change the subject?
He changes the subject. That's what you just did. I'm not going to let you do that. This is our democracy, and people go to vote. This is part of the fabric of America, is having your full rights established and nobody interferes. Why is Mueller doing what he's doing, this investigation? We cannot have a foreign country dictate our policies or our roles or our leadership, period. We have issues with Bernie. We have issues with Bernie. We have issues with Hillary. Yes, that's something that we deal with behind the scenes. That's what we deal with behind the scenes. But we cannot allow a foreign state, a foreign country to dictate what happens here.
I don't disagree, but I think whether Russia got involved or not, I think Donald Trump is still going to get elected.
No, I think there were three but-for reasons.
It's just fundamental.
That Trump won. By but-for, I mean, had they not happened, Trump would have won. Trump only won by 70,000 votes in the three states that mattered. He lost by 3 million votes. But if Hillary had beat him by 3.5 million votes, Hillary would have won. But one was clearly the Russians. Had that not happened, Trump wouldn't have been elected. Everything else.
What they do specifically?
Facebook. After Trump asked them to go into Hillary's emails, they got the emails and they went after. Plus they had
WikiLeaks,
160,000 or million Facebook. They did an awful lot, and we don't know for sure how much they did.
And do you know what you have to do as a candidate?
Comey probably was another but-for. Had Trump done that, but Comey didn't do his thing, 10 days before the election. But the third, and by far the most important, was Bernie Sanders. Had Bernie Sanders not decided to run against her, she would have won easily. So that brings us, people who supported Bernie Sanders essentially had, ended up with Donald Trump. Now, the one thing that pissed me off when people say the Russians interfering with our elections and they're trying to weaken our faith in democracy. Well, Putin loves democracy. That's what he can rig. But it's like saying, but he's not doing it to weaken our faith in democracy. Like, when the football player deflated the footballs, like Tom Brady in Boston, he wasn't doing it to shake America's faith in football. He was doing it to win. Putin's doing this to win. He didn't care what America he had. Now that's not the case. 50 years ago, the Russians went to Adlai Stevenson and said, I think you'd be better than Eisenhower. Is there any way we can help you? And just picked up the phone, called the FBI.
Yeah.
And
See, the other side of that is people will say that the American government has interfered in other
Oh, yeah,
countries'
that's-
elections.
You think?
Ongoing. I mean, that's what people say. But the thing is as an elected leader, I have to speak as an elected leader. Our democracy and our flag is everything.
Right.
It's everything. And if we have, I personally believe that when I ran for office, it is because I support our country, I support my state, and I don't want anybody from any other country to try to dictate our freedoms. Because when they do that, we already as black people are not treated equally. Then you have some Russians come in, and then you're really not going to be treated. Your vote is really not going to be counted.
I don't
targeting
disagree.
black
Just so
people
you,
to get them
They
not
sure
to-
were.
just so you know, I don't disagree with what you're saying.
You
I
just
think,
like to be controversial.
no, I want to hear what Mueller has to say. I want to hear what Comey has to say. If something happened illegal, we should get to the bottom of it. But at the end of the day, I think John McLaughlin, I'm not saying that. John McLaughlin said there's certain things that issues that in Washington people battle over that really don't matter to the people, to the general public. And this populist movement has been going on around the world. Whether you agree that Donald Trump has switched midstream from this populist rhetoric he had during the campaign, but this populist movement has been going on around the world. You look at rather Bernie Sanders, you look at rather
In
Donald
some places,
Trump.
it's much worse.
You look at Brexit. You look at rather Beppe Grillo in Italy. You look at the rise of populism
Greece.
in France.
Look at
In France,
Greece.
so it's this populist movement in the rising. And Donald Trump didn't print $30 trillion and give it to his donors. He didn't. Somebody else did that. Just so you know.
Well, but I
Well,
think-
that's not the point that I'm arguing, though. That is not my point.
that-
And the point I'm arguing that is that there's certain issues that are really, really important to Washington or amongst politicians that I don't think resonates that strongly with the public.
That could be true. That could be true. But that is why there are people
So
who
we
care. I don't know if I feel comfortable agreeing.
I mean,
But that is why some people care about some of these monuments. That's why some of us care about our economic policies.
Right, I think some people care about the monuments because they want to create a false flag. It's a
Yeah,
false
I
flag.
wouldn't
It's a
say
false
that.
flag
I wouldn't say that.
I've been on
Because
Earth 50 years, nobody ever asked me how I felt about a flag or a statue. So they're asking now because they're
I know
trying
when
to
I
mask,
say-
they're trying to mask how weak this what the stories you're telling about people in your district, the 16-year-olds they want to mask that. The 16-year-old take care of her own
But that's
family.
everybody. That's Democrats and Republicans who don't want to see. Here's the thing. Well, I got to say this. Black women in America are the most disrespected group in our society. We are expected to vote for one party, and what do we get in return? Go into our inner cities. How many buildings do you see in decay? How many buildings where kids go to school, that school is unaccredited? How many kids go to school and the clothes are dirty? How many kids don't have any books? How many parents don't have any child support? How many parents have to work 2 jobs? How many parents are worried about where they're going to live next month, and we don't have people who are willing to stand up for the black woman, and the black woman happens to be the foundation of the Democratic Party.
And how many of those black
And
women,
we're still disrespected.
and how many of those black women benefited from this $30 trillion wealth effect that was created by the Barack Obama administration?
He had no
and
choice.
went on. How many benefited? I know how many hedge fund managers benefited. I can tell you how many private equity firms benefited.
You
I can
can
tell you.
find-
Let me finish. I can tell you how many Wall Street titans benefited. I can't tell you how many black women benefited.
Well, to the extent they got health care, probably did make a difference, but isn't it exactly,
So I'm on one point. So when you call, I don't think I'm gonna say this. And I'm gonna say it very clearly. I don't think you can check Trump if you didn't check Obama. You didn't check
Oh,
Obama.
I
don't think
agree.
you checked.
I agree. No,
Right.
no, no, no,
Right.
no.
Because
But go back to Clinton.
Let me finish.
Go back to
Let me
Clinton,
finish.
though. And you talked about
Let me
Clinton
finish.
today, so I agree with you.
There's a lady in my neighborhood when I was growing up
Getting the black
who
woman out of me right now.
want to discipline everybody's kid in the neighborhood. She got 2 hellions, about to go to jail. It's just life and stock of her neighborhood. She want to discipline everybody else's kids. We can't discipline our own.
Yeah,
We
but-
want. You got all these black folks want to check Trump. Why don't you check the last guy who was in office? Check him.
No, I agree
Yeah,
with
but
that,
that's-
though. I agree with that, though, but we should be
No, I don't-
checking
I
everybody. We should be
disagree.
accountable. We
Well,
should
I
keep
think-
everybody
I think,
accountable.
Yeah. In New York State, we have a primary between Cuomo, the governor, and Cynthia Nixon. Tell you the truth, I would vote for Cynthia Nixon if I didn't live in a rent-stabilized apartment. And the reason is that, Cuomo, if he wins, that's the end of the thing. If Cynthia Nixon wins, there's a pretty good chance that the Republicans are going to take over the governorship, and they'd love to get rid of rent stabilization. So, and there's a lot of people in Brooklyn who wouldn't be
And
too
that's how
happy with
people think
that.
about
So, now I think Obama, he did everything he could. There's nothing he wanted to extend unemployment benefits. He wanted to have, although he was slightly to the right of Hillary Clinton. I mean, just in general, he was sort of against what was now Obamacare. He said you shouldn't fine people. But he was slightly to the left of Hillary Clinton, to the right of Hillary Clinton. But he was, to say, well, if you're criticizing Trump, you should criticize Obama. I mean, that's, it's saying.
We should keep everybody
Criticizing Charles
accountable.
Manson, you should also criticize the guy who, left his car in the parking lot.
Okay. So I want to. Okay, the last issue I want to talk about just briefly, social unrest, which I wrote about already. I predicted a few years ago. It's called Shock Exchange. How inner city kids from Brooklyn predicted the Great Recession and the pain ahead. So it's already been written about. So what do you think about social unrest? And then I want to take it to get some people in the audience to ask questions.
Well, I read a thing about that, I think it was yesterday, I think it was in New York Magazine, but it was saying about how, we're so polarized now and the economy's sort of, imagine when the next recession, and the next recession is coming, this recovery is 111 months old. And when it gets to be 120, it'll be the longest recovery ever.
Right.
And expansion ever, and it just sick. They didn't repeal the business cycle.
Right.
The business cycle, and if anything, it's exacerbated because what causes the business cycle is, as you said, the rich get richer, and the poor, the non-rich, the 99%, can't keep buying the stuff that they got to sell them to, and that's of course that happens every time.
That's
It happened in
basic
1837. The
economic
panic in 1837 was much worse than even the 1929 recession, but people don't remember it because in 1837, 75% of people lived on farms and they grew their own food, and made their own clothing, and killed their own meat, and hunted for their own thing, their own fish. So the fact that the banks all collapsed in 1837, if you're living in subsistence, you're eating your own food, you're not getting laid off. And even in 1837, if you lost your job making wagons or something, you literally, in 1837, if you lived in Pennsylvania, you could start walking west, and when you got to Nebraska, the government, if you just showed up, they'd give you 160 acres to homestead at.
Yes.
So you- so-
yes,
so you-
yes,
So in
yes.
1929, you didn't have that. So you didn't have, you couldn't just walk west. The lands, the government thought no one's going to give you.
In
So
fact,
so
more
so
old
you
people
so you
were
said
going
you think
to
there
cities.
could be a potential for social unrest if this another.
Yeah, that person was saying
Okay.
that already there's such deep divide. Imagine what happens when the economy goes
Right.
Yeah,
down.
and I agree
Which
with
is-
him 100%, but I have to go back to the belief that we have a false bottom, and we haven't hit the bottom yet. And just to restart the economy is going to take a lot. And then when you look at
It takes a
who-
political will. Yeah.
you have to have the political will, and you have to have the infrastructure in place that will allow for all people to be able to sustain themselves. But right now, we're not in that situation, and obviously, we know where Congress is at.
Okay, so I want to take it to anybody has any questions, just come up here and ask.
This has been lively today.
Ask Maria or Professor Rothman or myself. Anybody has any questions? No, I know Mr. Sabio. You.
No, it's been a very interesting conversation.
You can come up if you have a question in front of the camera. Yeah, so people can see you.
I don't know that I have any particular questions.
So come up so you can see, so the camera can see. Yeah.
Yes, this is sufficient.
Yeah.
Just, you know, I mean, in terms of voting, I'm old school, as the saying goes. I'm a veteran, and I've been in this neighborhood now 41 years. When I moved into this neighborhood, it was economically depressed. But I worked in a job where I had a good economy. My wife was a teacher, I was a city engineer, and we had a good economy. Over the years, we put our children through school, and we expected that there would be jobs, which would be career-based jobs. I worked for the Transit Authority, and my wife, as I said, worked for the Public Board of Education. However, in the last 15 years, while the neighborhood economically boomed, individuals and groups of individuals suffered. The economy, the tariffs that you're referring to, the economy was shipped overseas. Manufacturing completely dissipated as far as this country is concerned. I mean, what do we actually manufacture now? Social media. That's, you know, Facebook, as you pointed out. I don't think that, my father said to me, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So, and he also gave me this little bit. He said, to each is given a book of rules, a building block, and a bag of tools, and to each must shape ere time is flown, a stumbling block or a stepping stone. We're on the stumbling block. And I haven't, you know, dismissed the term false bottom, but I think we are aware. And one point that was pointed out was, this is manufactured drama. I'm 70 years old. So when I look at the generations that have to come behind me, I don't think that this economy is going to sustain. Excuse me. The problem that we have today is we don't want to see the next man benefit. And I think that that's been entrenched. And there's also the psychology of racial terrorism. The media is constantly projecting negative images. Now, we talk about the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms, but when you see a black man with a gun, the first thing you do is you start shooting. He's a criminal automatically. We have no backstory on why he has that gun. I went to Vietnam, and I spent 2 years in Vietnam. I saw people from Arkansas come over and use racial epithets to describe the Vietnamese people who were fighting for their land. We've been in this country for over 130,000 years. And when I say America, I'm not talking about the United States. The United States to me is a bank appearing as a country. It's not a country. The America and the United States are two different entities. I'm very angry and fed up with the nonsense that I see. We're full-grown adults, and we're playing, you know, sophomoric games about economics. We know because we were the basis agriculturally for this country's wealth.
That's
and
right.
now people are angry because we're not the same people that we were during slavery.
Yes.
We're educated, we're intelligent, and now that we're able to make certain political and economic moves, all of a sudden the economy goes into a depression. Why is that? What is it that necessitates us being on the bottom? People can come in here from Asia, Africa, Europe, and within 5 years, they're up the ladder. You stand here and a guy comes into a job, and we know that. I worked on Madison Avenue in an advertising company, and this was in the early 60s. Well, not the early 60s, but it was a summer internship after I graduated from high school, which was, at the time, I was 15 years old. So I had a summer job working as an intern, and I saw people come in, and I saw people who were there for 20 years or more actually train these people, and then they went up the ladder. And these people stayed. It's a maintenance of an economic situation. You get free labor, then why pay someone?
Yeah.
And we have the Chinese who came in and built the railroads. It's a general economic problem. I'm Latino. A lot of people don't realize that, but my family's from Central America. I'm an American. And yet I watch people come over here and they tell me they're Americans, but what have they done? When you get Kaepernick kneeling for the flag, first and foremost, we don't understand that the flag was the national anthem was penned by Francis Scott Key,
Yeah.
and he owned slaves.
Yeah.
Our whole psyche right now is based upon a lie, false facts, false news. And until the truth is told, we're going to have a problem. And I don't care whether you're a millionaire or whether you're a pauper, we're going to have problems because people are emotionally bankrupt. Their ethics and their morality is emotionally and is bankrupt. And until we sit down and formulate a new paradigm, we're done.
Yeah.
The values of this system are done. And I don't mean because you have a white picket fence and you're living in a house. No, the values, human values are done. And when Trump can, emblazon a banner for people who, use a tiki, what do you call it?
Tiki torches.
This reminds me of a Frankenstein movie where everyone came to the house to burn the monster, but they created the monster.
Yes.
Okay? They created the
Yes.
monster. So
Thank you so
I'm,
much.
I'm scattering my ideas, but I understand the premise, and we have a lot of work to do.
Yep.
And to the youth,
Thank
what are
you.
we leaving them? What kind of a legacy? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. So, is there any more questions? Any more questions? So, thank you for that. So we're gonna wrap up now. But I'm exhausted. I didn't know I had to come and fight two people. I thought this was gonna be a very collegial environment, but hey, I've been beaten up tonight, and I thought I had some good points, but apparently these two.
You have some good
These
points.
two did. No, I'm being facetious. But yeah, thank you again. The next event will be in November. I want to particularly thank Senator Maria Shapiro-Nadal for being here. This was very. I learned a lot. I learned a lot what politicians go through and what you're going through, and I hope you got something out of it too that you can maybe take back to.
It's a great
Missouri.
conversation. It's a great conversation, and I'm just really glad that you offer this space and what you do. And I think having these debates is really, really, really healthy. So we don't have to agree, but as my grandfather always said, at least understand why someone has a perspective, and that's healthy.
And these conversations are not being. You're not gonna hear this in the mainstream media. You're gonna hear it just I don't think you get the information. I think you get the vitriol. I think you get the emotion. I don't think you get the information.
Yeah,
So,
check.
but thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. That it? That's all? Wow, that was intense.
Just
That's great.
Just to plug economic education.